Be a talk, it's going to be a discussion on the life of Samson. And it's not a topic I chose, it was a topic that I was invited to give, but I'm very glad that it was chosen for me, because there's lots to learn from Samson. Does anybody know where the story is in the Bible?
Book of Judges.
Mm-hmm. Good. What chapters? No, it gets a bit harder, doesn't it? So actually, when I was invited to give this talk or discussion, I realised that Samson is one of those stories that actually, as we're growing up, you get taught in Sunday school, maybe when you're about 4 years old, 5 years old, because it's a fun story for the Sunday school teachers to give, and you can act it out, and it's one like David and Goliath, like a regular story, it's quite fun. And then, unfortunately, you kind of miss out on the story of Samson later on in life. You don't really come back to it. I think I might have read it only once or twice, maybe, since I was a child. And it's, there's a lot to learn from these stories in the Old Testament that sometimes they get reserved for the younger kids, and we neglect them throughout our adult lives. So we're going to go through the story of Samson in Judges, correct? Chapters 13 to 16. So I've got a lot of verses on the screen here, but if you've got Bibles as well, feel free to use them. We're not going to read all of it, we'll probably read about 95% of it. So it's still quite a lot, I'm afraid, but I've picked out a few things. But to put Samson in the context of Bible history and the history of the Old Testament, it's in Judges, chapters 13 to 16. It's set, the whole book of Judges is set around 2 to 3 centuries, that sort of time period, after Moses had led the people into Canaan. He didn't go into the Promised Land himself, but he handed over the Israelites to Joshua into Canaan. And it's this period after they are dwelling in the Promised Land, they have judges every now and then appointed by God not to lead the people, not to be rulers over the people, but to deliver the people from their persecution and from their captivity. What happened was, unfortunately, the Israelites are a bit of a stubborn nation. They go into the Promised Land and they're very happy with themselves, and then they forget their God, and then they betray their God, and then they get punished, and then they get overtaken by people, and then they become captives, and then God says, he doesn't do anything until they realize their big mistake, and then they repent and they wail and cry and say, please God deliver us, and then God gives them the judge, and he delivers them from that situation. So it's that sort of period of time, 12 judges, lots and lots of captivity, lots and lots of rebellion, lots and lots of repentance, and lots of salvation and deliverance. That's right. And it starts with Joshua leading the people into the Promised Land. It starts with the death of Joshua after he's led them into the Promised Land, and it ends with the story of Samson, the period of the Judges. After that, after the period of the Judges, then you get the period of the Kings, where King Saul was the first one initiated by Prophet Samuel, and then you get the period of Kings after the period of Judges. So that just puts it into a bit of context. Good. Next week, I think you're going to have a talk on Gideon. He's another one of the judges. And so this is the story of a judge, Samson, who was a very strong man, and he was weakened throughout his life to become a very weak man. Next week you'll hear a story of Gideon, who was a very weak man to start with, and then God strengthened him throughout his life to become a very strong man. So a story of contrasts. It'll be very interesting. So if you're here this week, try and attend next week. Anyway, the story of Judges. Of Samson in Judges. We're going to go through a few verses that I've picked out, and we're going to see what we can learn from the story of Samson. I think when we come to stories like this, especially Old Testament stories, it's all very clear in the Bible. There's no need to go and look for major interpretations or deep decipherments from various people interpreting things. Let's just read the Bible, let's read what's there, and see what lessons we can learn from it. You don't need to use a lot of imagination and make up things that aren't there, because actually the message is very clear throughout. And we'll read it and we'll see what we can find out for ourselves. So, There's lots and lots of pages with lots and lots of verses, and it's going to be an interactive session, unfortunately for you guys who wanted to come and sleep. So we're going to take one page each. There's lots of pages to go around, and one person is going to read one page, and we'll move on. But after we read a page, we'll say what we can learn from the story so far. So let's start with Peter. So we'll start with you. You just read what's on this whole page, so the first and second points, and then we'll talk about what we can learn so far.
Again the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hands of Philistines for 40 years. Now therefore, please be careful not to drink wine or similar drink, and do not eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head. For a child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines.
Good, so we've already got an idea of what sort of time period we're in. This is another deliverance from another enemy. Who is the people, who is the enemy here? Who are the people who have taken Israel captive? The Philistines. So we're up against the Philistines here. And throughout Judges, they come up against a fair few set of enemies. So this time it's the Philistines' turn. And they were under the Philistines for 40 years. And God here has chosen them to be delivered here by the hand of Samson. And that was the first part. The second part is actually words that were said to the mother of Samson before Samson was born by, what it says in the Bible, an angel of the Lord. But capital A, capital L makes you think it is pre-incarnate, the pre-incarnate God who is talking to the parents of Samson. Certainly, you know, it was the power of God and the message of God in the words of the angel of the Lord. And they were trembling at the knees when they realized this was the angel of the Lord. And they thought they were going to die, but thankfully they didn't, and they gave birth to Samson. But he had some very clear instructions for Samson. What were they?
Not drink wine. Do not eat anything unclean. And you shall
Not cut his hair.
Not have a haircut. Yeah, it's a bit sad, isn't it? Imagine what we'd be like if we couldn't have a haircut. But this is from Numbers chapter 6. Numbers chapter 6, it details the instructions for a Nazarite. Let me just read out the first few verses of Numbers chapter 6 so that we get an idea of what this Nazarite should be, or what they should be like. So he says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When either a man or a woman consecrates an offering to take the vow of a Nazarite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine, nor vinegar made from similar drink. Neither shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, from seed to skin. So, that's number one. Should we say, let's say Nazarites? Any excuse to use the blackboard. So number one, let's, for simplicity's sake, just say no wine.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then he goes on to say, all the days of the vow of his separation, no razor shall come upon his head. Until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself to the Lord, he shall be holy. Then he shall let the locks of his head grow. So that's the second one. What's that? Should we say no haircut?
No haircut.
Good. And then number three, there's one more. It says, all the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. He shall not make himself unclean, even for his father or his mother or his brother or his sister when they die, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation he shall be holy to the Lord. That's the third thing. So what's the third thing?
He's not allowed to attend funerals?
Pretty much, yeah. He can't really go anywhere near dead bodies. He can't touch a dead body, he can't go near a dead body. He shouldn't really be absolutely, even if that dead body's a relative. So if his dad dies and he wants to bury him, unfortunately you can't. So it's quite a big deal, you know. No haircut, no wine, we could do that, but actually no dead bodies, which is what I'm going to write now. Sounds okay in principle, but actually in reality and practice it's quite hard. Fine, so no dead bodies. Those are the three things that Samson, as a Nazarite, is supposed to do in his life. And this was warned, it was the message delivered to his mum, so his mum knew from birth she was going to bring him up in this way. He was going to be a Nazarite. He was going to not drink wine, not have a haircut, and not touch dead bodies. Good. Mary, you've got a short one, you're ill.
So the woman bore a son, called his name Samson. The child grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Mahane Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol.
Very good. It's the shortest, but it's the hardest. I just picked this verse out because you start to see that the Spirit of the Lord began to work in the life of Samson from a very young age. This is the first mention of the Spirit of the Lord in Samson's life. So, he was a good man, he was a great man. He was blessed by the Lord, he was consecrated to the Lord, and he had the Spirit of the Lord working inside him. It wasn't specific as to how in these verses, we don't know, but obviously he was very blessed and very holy. Good. Michael, over to you.
Now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. So he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. And his father and his mother said to him, Is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren, or among all my people, that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she pleases me well.
Good. Anything wrong so far? He's a Nazarite. He's not allowed to drink wine, he's not allowed to have a haircut, and he's not allowed to go near dead bodies. Has he done anything wrong? What do you think? Controversial question, isn't it? So, if you were Samson and you loved this girl on the other side of the camp, you'd say, no, nothing's wrong at all. You know, I haven't had a haircut, and I haven't drunk any wine, and I haven't gone near any dead bodies. But what's the first clue here? There are a couple of clues in this page here that there is something that might become a problem in the future. First one's got to do with these two.
His parents don't approve.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, like your parents are wise people, right? We'd like to think so, even though we don't like to think so most of the time. But his parents here start to question this fact. Hopefully, you know, if you guys, you know, if we all want to get married to somebody, or we want to go to somebody, we're going to look for the approval of our parents. We're not going to be like waiting for our parents to say, what? Why are you going to go and marry that person? No way. What about all these people? You know. So that's the first sign that something a little bit fishy is going on here. Mum and Dad question him and say, actually, there's nothing there that they say, okay, yeah, let's go, that's fine. You know, there's just questions. And the second clue is here, and here, and here, and here. What's that? I, me, I want, get me now, I want this, get me now. Right? So obviously, you know, he likes something, he wants it, he's probably used to getting what he wants. Now he likes a woman from the Philistines and he says, I'm going to have her. That again is the second warning sign that, hang on a minute, you know, if you start to see somebody who insists on something and wants his own way, and he says, I, me, I, and doesn't appreciate the bigger picture, like, for example, his parents' picture, let alone God's picture, you know, he knows that this is the enemy that he's been sent to deliver the people from, and he's going into the enemy's camp and saying, I want this, get me that. Okay, good. So we're starting to learn a little bit about some of the weaknesses of Samson.
But his father father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord, that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and came to the vineyards of Timnah. Now to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lion apart as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand, but he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done.
Okay, so now we're getting into serious territory. We agreed that maybe Samson could be mistaken for thinking he's not done anything wrong, because so far he hasn't drunk any wine and he hasn't had a haircut and he hasn't touched any dead bodies. But now we're getting into serious territory, because we're starting to see more warning signs that actually, if he wants this woman, he wants to marry this woman and go to this woman and be with this woman, there are very clear warning signs that are on the way. And what warning signs has he come across against so far? What has he seen?
Do you know the dead bodies?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like including animals?
Mm-hmm. Anything?
Baptized.
Yeah. Uh-oh. So that's one warning sign. Yes. Very good. So here, I think the first warning sign is that a lion came up in front of you and said, "Rawr." You know, if a lion came up to me and said that, I'd be thinking, right, I'm going to turn around and run. This is not the place for me to be. But you know, he turned that warning sign into an even greater warning sign, but that was his disobedience and no dead bodies. Okay, good. And what about anything else here? So remember, no wine. That was just a simplification. It wasn't just no wine, was it? It was no grapes, no raisins, no grape juice. You can't touch it. So what's he doing? Where's he going? He's choosing a path riddled with warning signs and temptations. He's going past a vineyard. Like, he knows he's not supposed to. Okay, maybe he won't go in and have a drink of wine, but he's clearly putting himself into a place of weakness and point of weakness here. No?
It does say in the first paragraph that this was all part of God's plan.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. We'll come on to that. So it's a good thought. Hold it there. It's a very good thought, but we'll come on to that towards the end. Very, very good. Okay, Mark. So long. Sorry.
And then he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. After some time, when he returned to get her, he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, a swarm of bees and honey were in the carcass of the lion. He took some of it in his hands and went along, eating. When he came to his father and mother, he gave some to them, and they also ate. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So his father went down to the woman, and Samson gave a feast there, for young men used to do so.
Very good. So, again, there's a couple of warning signs here, and they seem to be getting deeper and deeper and involving more and more people. So this time, he went down to visit, and he came back. He saw the dead body again. What did he do this time? This is a proper dead body. If they've got swarms of bees brewing honey, this is a body that's been dead for a long, long time. It's not. it's if he's not supposed to touch dead bodies, then he's definitely touched a dead body right here. You could argue the lion was alive, and then he killed it. It was still sort of breathing its last breath on the floor. It's dead now. He definitely touched it. So now he's doing things that he really knows he's not supposed to be doing. We knew that from before because he didn't tell his mum and dad what he had done. He didn't tell them about the lion. He didn't tell them that he killed him. Now what did he do? So actually, not only is he not telling them, but he is feeding them honey from a dead body and not telling them where it came from. Like, I'll be really annoyed if I found out that the honey that I got on my table in the evening is from a dead body and nobody told me. But he clearly knows that something's wrong. He knows what he's doing is wrong. This is the key. If he thought it was okay, he'd share the story. He'd tell them, "Oh, Mum and Dad, I killed the lion. Okay, check me out." But he knows that he's doing something that's not quite right, and he's keeping it a secret from them.
I don't get why doesn't he just get honey from someone?
Exactly.
They didn't have the local Tesco at the time.
You could argue that he looked at the body or the carcass and was kind of proud of himself and said, hey, this is my doing, this is my work, I killed that lion, and now look, there's a reward for me in it.
Like, I don't know, was that normal then to just eat the lean apple?
I hope that was never normal in the whole history of mankind. I'll be very concerned for the mental health of those people that thought it was normal. But I don't know, it's a good point that you raised. It's a good point. So, he's now touching dead bodies for definite. And there's another warning sign looking at these three. I'll give you a clue, it's not the no haircut one.
It's the one.
Huh?
No.
Yeah. Just at the bottom here. Just read it out for us again, Peter.
So his father went down to the woman, and the sons gave a feast there, for young men used to do so.
Right, so is this a feast in the camp of the Israelites or a feast in the camp of the Philistines?
Philistines.
The Philistines, exactly. Word on the street, the Philistines know how to party. Yeah,
Drinking.
exactly. I think so. If he's talking about a feast, like the young men used to do so in the camp of the Philistines, we know what sort of party that is. It doesn't say that he drank wine, but it can be safely assumed that he might have drunk wine. At least he put himself in a tempting situation where wine would be present. That's at the very least. Again, warning signs that things aren't going quite right for this poor chap. Joe.
And it happened when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. Then Samson said to them, let me pose a riddle to you. If you can correctly solve and explain it to me within the 7 days of the feast, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. But if you cannot explain it to me, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. And they said to him, pose your riddle, that we may hear it. So he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Now for 3 days they could not explain the riddle.
It's quite a tough riddle, actually, isn't it? Smart man. So,
Only him who knew the riddle.
sorry?
Only him who knew this riddle.
Yeah, you could almost argue it's quite unfair, you know, it's so smart that he knows nobody's going to get the answer and he's going to get this prize of the 30 changes of the clothing and the 30 garments. It's a win-win situation, you know, nobody's going to know this answer except him. He's a smart man, he worked something out that they wouldn't be able to work out, and he's intelligent, you know. Not anybody can come up with a riddle like that in no time and be so proud and so confident to claim such a grand prize at such great cost to him if he loses. So he's very confident, but also a smart man. And that's important to note, because you could say the poor chap was a bit dim and he didn't see the warning signs and, you know, let's feel sorry for him. Actually, smart man. He can see things and he can work things out. He knows what he's doing. He's a smart chap and he can see the warning signs and he knows that he's putting himself into a dangerous situation. Is it my turn? I think it's my turn. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they said to Samson's wife, entice your husband, that he may explain the riddle to us, or else we will burn you and your father's house with fire. It's a bit over the top, isn't it? Have you invited us in order to take what is ours? Is that not so? Then Samson's wife wept on him and said, you only hate me, you do not love me. You have posed a riddle to the sons of my people, but you have not explained it to me. And he said to her, look, I have not explained it to my father or my mother, so should I explain it to you? Now she had wept on him the 7 days whilst their feast lasted. And it happened on the 7th day that he told her, because she pressed him so much. Then she explained the riddle to the sons of her people. So, just one slide ago we were saying, smart man, intelligent man, you know, he knows what's going on. Still smart? What do you think?
Swayed by emotions, I don't know.
Well, has anybody ever experienced on their wedding 7 days their new wife weeping on them and saying, you don't love me, you don't love me? To be fair, the poor guy was probably going through emotional turmoil for 7 days. So he probably wasn't thinking straight by the 7th day. He was like, look, I'll just tell you whatever you want, just stop crying on me. So that's probably what happened. So, you know, let's not give him such a hard time. Maybe he was putting himself in a very difficult emotional situation. But self-inflicted, you know. Don't forget, back at the beginning of the story, he chose this wife, he wanted her for him, he thought this was the right decision to make, and he wanted things to go how they were. He posed the riddle himself. He wanted this riddle to be told to the people and to show off his confidence and intelligence. Again, self-inflicted. So you could argue that this is fairly self-inflicted. But the poor man must have gone through a lot of emotional hurt in 7 days to break down and crumble at the feet of a woman, which he did here in this case. Is there any love in this story so far? Can you tell that this is a marriage between two people that love each other? Or why not?
She hasn't separated from her people.
Who has whose interests at heart here? What's the reason Samson's new wife wants to know the answer to the riddle?
That her father's house isn't touched.
Yeah, so that she and her father's house don't get burnt with fire. It's a fair enough reason, to be honest with you. But she's got her own interests at heart. You know, she's looking out for herself and her dad. You wouldn't blame her. You'd say, well, you know, fair enough, really. But she definitely doesn't have any faith or trust in Samson, her new husband, and she's not going to run away with him or anything like that. She's going to stay put with her dad, and she wants to not burn, and therefore she's got her own interests at heart, and she's going to get the answer out of Samson. And again, whose interests does Samson have at heart?
His own.
His own, right? He's got this wailing wife next to him in the corner for 7 days. He wants her to not wail anymore and weep. So he's going to give her the answer, and he's going to get some peace of mind finally. There's no love in the story. Yeah, nobody has the other person's interest at heart. It would have looked completely different if there was love there. Quite sad. Alright, over to Peter again. It's your turn.
So the man of the sea said to him, on the 7th day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than the wine? And he said to him, if you had not ploughed with my heaver, you would not have sowed my riddle. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon, and he killed 30 of their men, took their appeal, and gave the changes of clothes to those who had explained the riddle. So his anger arose, and he went back to his father's house, and the satisfied was given to his companion who had been his best man.
Okay. Very good. So, a bit weird, isn't it? There's quite a lot happening in this one. Poor Samson realises that these guys found out the answer to his riddle. And automatically, the first thing going through his mind is himself. We know that he's self-centered. He's thinking, now I've got to find 30 pieces of clothing and 30 garments to give these people. Where am I going to find those? What a pain. And then he realises that his wife betrayed him. He's like, oh man, now my wife's against me, now my wife's betraying me. Life sucks. And so, interestingly, it says, then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. So he's still in connection and in communion with God. And the Spirit of the Lord still works through him and gives him supernatural power. Nobody can just go in and kill 30 people, take their clothing and give it as a prize to whoever is at the claim of the prize. And the Spirit of the Lord was allowing things to happen and giving him strength to continue to do essentially what he wanted. We'll come on to that point after the studies. It's an interesting point. You know, the Lord allowed these things to happen. You know? Let's start to follow the events of the story in a bit more detail. So here, no wine. We've said that he's fallen into that trap already. No dead bodies. He's fallen into that trap already. And now we're going to see how sin, starting very, very subtly and very small, can spiral out of control. Here, what's happened so far? So, he's already, let's just talk about killing people and murder. How many people has he killed?
30.
30. So we've already got 30 people dead. Don't forget, no dead bodies. Okay, good. Mary.
After a while, in the time of the wheat harvest, it happened that Samson visited his wife with a young goat, and he said, let me go into my wife into her room, that her her father would not permit him to go in. The father said, I really thought that you thoroughly hated her. Therefore I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please take her instead. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harbour them.
Interesting. So the father of the bride said, your husband's gone, let's get you married to his best friend, as we do. And I guess that was okay for the Philistines to do, that was kind of the thing to be done. And then Samson turned up again, and he said, got a problem on our hands. Hey, look, she's got a younger sister. Why don't you take her instead? Samson, did he like this answer? He did not like this answer at all. Good. We're going to start to work out, or realise slowly, that Samson, although he can be smart if he wants to, he also allows his emotions to take control of his actions. He can get angry sometimes. So he's already made a threat there. This time I should be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harm them. Let's see if that was an empty threat, or if it wasn't an empty threat. Michael, over to you.
And then Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches, turned the fox's tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. When he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burnt up both the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and olive groves. And the Philistines said, who has done this? And they answered, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion. So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire.
Oh dear. So Samson, although he lost his wife, still kind of was attached to her. He still loved her. He came with an offering to start with, and then when he realised that this is the way the Philistines work, he didn't do any harm to his wife or his wife's father or the wife's new husband. He just said, I'll take it out on the Philistines. They're rubbish people. Let me get rid of them and kill them and ruin, destroy, whatever, and take away their wealth. So burnt up the shocks and the standing grain and the vineyards and olive groves. These were things that took centuries to grow. Vineyards and olive groves were not just bottles of wine, they were the fruit and they were the plants that provided for the people. So actually this is a huge, huge economic turmoil for the Philistines, what he did. And the Philistines acted appropriately, or they thought was appropriate, and they killed or destroyed the very people that Samson didn't want to kill or destroy, unfortunately. So he's already killed 30 men through his actions so far. Who else has died? 300 foxes and burnt to death, unfortunately, yes. But that's 6 humans for the purposes of this. So through his actions, directly and indirectly, here we've got his wife and his wife's father and their household. So it just says here, burns her and her father. So we'll put 2 more. But 2 people that are very dear to him, as opposed to 30 people that he didn't care about. Alright, Atman.
Samson said to them, since you would do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you, and after that I will cease. So he attacked them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. Then he went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Etam. Now the Philistines went up, encamped in Judah, and deployed themselves against Lee. And the men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? So they answered, we have come up to arrest Samson, to do to him as he has done to us.
Okay, it's escalating quite quickly, this story, isn't it? So now he's killed a lot of people. A great slaughter, it says here. And the Philistines want him. They're not happy. They see that the problem is Samson. They are going to go and find Samson. So he runs and hides in a cave, or he dwells in a cave. Philistines come up against the Israelites and say, give us Samson. So they said, what did they say? Mark, the Israelites, what did they say? So just read it.
From the top.
Yeah.
Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock. Am I reading the right bit?
Yeah.
Of Etam, and said to Samson, do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? What is this you have done to us? And he said to them, as they did to me, so I have done to them. But they said to him, "We have come down to arrest you, that we may deliver you into the hands of the Philistines." And Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not kill me yourselves." So they spoke to him, saying, "No, but we will tie you securely and deliver you into their hand, but we will surely not kill you." And they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock.
How many people did they send to deliver Samson to the Philistines? It's quite a lot, isn't it? 3,000 people. They were clearly quite scared of this guy, and they said, "He's got a lot of power, we can see what he's done. Let's get 3,000 people," and maybe just the sheer number of people will make him think, "Okay, I'm too tired to kill 3,000 people today, let's just see what they want. Let's hear about it." And so that's what happens. Good. Joe.
When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and killed 1,000 men with it. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey I have slain 1,000 men."
Very good. Don't forget that this guy was a Nazarite, but he was also a judge. And judges are there to deliver the Israelites from their captives, or from captivity, from whoever's taking them. And in this case, the Philistines. So he is supposed to be delivering the people from the Philistines. So actually, he's managed to kill 30, and then 2, and then lots, and then 1,000 Philistines. So he's doing quite well. But I'm sure there's lots more Philistines left. Again, we see a nice phrase here. "And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him." So still, the Spirit of the Lord is working in him. Again, we're reminded by what Michael flagged up at the beginning when it says, actually, the Lord allowed these things to happen. Maybe the Lord had a greater purpose or a greater plan and seemed to allow these things to happen. The Lord was still very much working in Samson at this stage and allowing what's happened to happen so far. It's involving a lot of death, and a lot of death of the Philistines, unfortunately. But interestingly, Samson speaks here. We've heard him speak before, we've heard him say his riddle to the people. We've heard him be annoyed when he finds out that his wife betrayed him. But what does he say here? Again, bearing in mind that who is it that gave him the strength to defeat these 1,000 men? The Lord. Actually, when he speaks, does he give any credit to the Lord at all? Who is it that's slain these 1,000 men? The Lord? Does he acknowledge that at all? No, me. Very self-centered. He's like, I have slain 1,000 men. And with what? With the jawbone of a donkey. Pretty impressive, but no mention of the Lord, unfortunately. Okay, it's not all bad, don't worry. Like, Samson is a holy man, he's in tune with God, so he prays. So let's hear his first prayer. Whose turn is it?
It's Joe.
No, you've done. Oh, who read that one?
I read that.
You read that one, didn't you? It's my turn. That's why I can't work out his turn. So let's hear Samson's prayer. Then he became very thirsty. So he cried out to the Lord and said, "You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised?" What a nice prayer, isn't it? So it's a really great connection and conversation with God. So God split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank, and his spirit returned, and he revived. And he judged Israel 20 years in the day of the Philistines. So, poor Samson, we're giving him a hard time today, aren't we? He should probably deserve more credit than he's getting. But the first mention of any sort of prayer in the Bible for Samson was, "God, I'm thirsty, where's my water? Thank you. Thank you for the water, now I'm better." Is unfortunately what we get. Anyway, he's a self-centered chap. He gets what he wants, and he gets what he wants. He demanded water from the Lord, and the Lord gave him water, so obviously the Lord loved him and cared about him a lot. Is it Peter's turn?
Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot and went to her. When the Gazites were told, "Samson has come here," they surrounded the place and laid in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They were quiet all night, saying, "In the morning, when it's daylight, we will kill him." And Samson lay low till midnight. Then he arose out at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two gateposts, pulled them up a bar and all, but put them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron.
Okay, so goes in to see a prostitute. Enough said. Mary.
Afterwards it happened that he left a woman in the valley of Sorrow, whose name was Delilah, and the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to him, entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies, and with what you may be bound to afflict you.
Very good. So we've heard one love story between him and his first wife. We've heard a bit of a blip. He goes in to see a prostitute, and now this is the kind of second love story of Samson. He finds Delilah and he loves Delilah. Let's see, take two. Let's see if he has any more luck this time, or if he manages to handle it a bit more wisely. All we hear is that he loves Delilah. Doesn't say anywhere that she loves him. What's in it for her? Apart from a great, big, strong man who's probably very handsome.
He was a judge.
Doesn't really matter to her because she was a Philistine. Yeah, but 1,100 pieces of silver each from how many people? Doesn't say, but a lot of people. So we're talking, you know, what's equivalent to winning the lottery overnight if she just entices this guy. So there's a lot in it for her actually. She gets a handsome, young, dashing, strong man, and also the lottery. So not bad. So of course she's going to love him, or pretend to love him. She's definitely going to entice him. To cut a long story short, I could add a lot of verses here to and fro between Delilah saying, what's your secret? And Samson lying to her, and then she's saying, oh, but you don't love me. Tell me what the secret is. Every time, you'll notice that Samson tells her a lie. She then pretends that the Philistines are upon him. He knows that she's betraying him. She knows that he's lying to her. Again, you know, who's in it for, whose interests, who has whose interests at heart here? Again, she's got her own interests at heart. He's got his own interests at heart. Anyway, so cut that long story short. Is it Mike? Your turn? Or is it Michael's turn?
And then she said to him, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength lies. And it came to pass when she pestered him daily with her words and pressed him, so that his soul was vexed to death, that he told her all his heart, and said to her, no razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, and saying, come up once more, for he has told me all his heart. So the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hand. Then she lulled him to sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. So he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as before at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him.
Oh, what's going on in this passage, isn't there? Let's go back to our 1, 2, 3. All good things happen in threes. Maybe all bad things happen in threes as well. So he's now lost his hair. And the 3 things that he was supposed to never ever do, he has now managed finally to do them. Poor man. And at what expense? Again, so we talked about, this is the second love story of Samson. Take 2, maybe, you know, hopefully he'll get a bit more luck. Unfortunately not. He found another woman that pestered him daily with her words and vexed him to death. So, bad choice, again. He goes with what he sees. He doesn't choose the character or the heart. He chooses, unfortunately, what's in front of him and what he sees, and almost is blinded by it and falls head over heels into the trap. Should he have known better? Has he been in a similar situation before? Yeah. He's a smart man, but where he realised he can come up with good riddles. He's a smart guy. He should have known better, but never mind. At the bottom there, again, we see a man who is unfortunately so blinded by what's been happening in his life so far, he has completely lost touch with the Lord. And at the bottom it says, so he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as before, at other times, and shake myself free. So again, who is trusting in who? There's only Samson trusting in only himself. He thinks he can do it as he did at other times. There is no acknowledgement of the work of the Lord here at all. He's not saying, and the Lord will deliver me like the Lord delivered me the other times. No, it's just, I will do what I normally do because I can do it and I'm going to do it. Could he? Not this time. Unfortunately, his luck had run out. Or, for another way of saying it, there at the bottom it says, he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Probably one of the saddest verses in the Bible. For somebody not to realise that the Lord had departed from them. So it's quite a claim that the Lord has left him. Is that right? Is that true? It must be because it says in the Bible, but what does it mean? Who left who?
He left them.
You'd think that actually Samson left the Lord, right? Rather than the Lord left Samson.
Because
So why does it say the Lord had departed from him?
no, God will never leave you. He will still be there.
Okay.
But as for when we trip all the time, we will fall and depart from God.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not God who's departing, it's actually Samson.
Spot on. Yeah, brilliant. So absolutely. So it's Samson through continuing in what he knows is the wrong path and willingly doing it and actually embracing it and saying, I can do it and I can save myself and I will fall and okay, I've fallen before and I acknowledge that I've fallen before, but I can shake myself free because I've freed myself before. I, no acknowledgement of the Lord. He has left the Lord. He has taken God out of the equation and he is the one who is putting himself in this situation where you see a situation where he is not in communion with God anymore. That relationship is broken down on his part, on Samson's part. He's just lost it. Good. Mum.
Then the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza. They bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. Now the lords of the Philistines gathered together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice, and they said, Our God has delivered into our hands Samson, our enemy. When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, Our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our land, and the one who multiplied our dead.
So we learn a bit more about what happened to Samson at this point. So what happened to Samson? The first thing is,
He became a grinder.
yeah, well, before that, before he became a grinder,
They plucked out his
he
eyes.
became blind. Yes, exactly. So let's start a new thing here. So blind. And then he became a grinder, okay? So he became a slave. So he was in prison, working for them as a prisoner, as a slave. He was enslaved by them. So not only was he blinded by the Philistines, he was enslaved by the Philistines. And then they were giving great sacrifices to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. They praised their god, and they gave more joy. And then to move on, Mark, just read the very first paragraph of this page.
So it happened when their hearts were merry, and they said, Call for Samson that he may perform for us. So they called for Samson from the prison, and he performed for them, and they stationed him between the pillars.
Good. So not only was he blind, not only was he slave, but he was made a mockery of. Oh yeah, he was mocked. So what does sin do to us? It blinds us, it enslaves us, and it makes a mockery or a fool of us. Couldn't be clearer than that. The poor man, he had to go through all that and be put in this situation, which is pretty dire, to realise that actually, hang on a minute, something might be wrong. I might have made a mistake somewhere along the line. Maybe I need to call upon God here because I'm kind of stuck. I have nowhere to go. Unfortunately, it took him to be blinded, enslaved, and made a mockery or made a fool of to get to that stage. But he does. Credit to the guy. He's a smart man. He realised it. Joe, over to you. The second paragraph.
Then Samson called to the Lord, saying, O Lord God, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, just this once, O God, that I may with one blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars which supported the temple, and he braced himself against them, one on his right and the other on his left. Then Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all his might, and the temple fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead that he killed at his death were more than he had killed in his life.
Good. So, it's a second prayer from Samson. It's slightly different to the first prayer. The first prayer, he was thirsty and he wanted water, and God gave him water. The second prayer, he was blind, he wanted vengeance for his 2 eyes, and he got vengeance for his 2 eyes. The poor man can't seem to get away from his self-centeredness. But this one was very slightly different. In fact, it was completely different. He acknowledges that he is now powerless, and he acknowledges where his strength came from, doesn't he? He realizes now that it's not up to him. He can't save the day all the time. Actually, he never saved the day any of the time. It was always God. And this is a prayer of repentance and a prayer of acknowledgement to say that you are the all-powerful God. You are the one that provides for me when I'm weak. You are the one whose strength strengthens us, and who is the one who gave me all the things that I've had in my life. And the Lord grants him his final request, to die with the Philistines and to kill the Philistines with him. So this number, so far, becomes even more at his death, more than who he killed in his lifetime. So even more death. So, yes, he did deliver the Israelites from the Philistines. Yes, it was God's plan. And yes, he died with repentance. He is a man of God. He is one of the Lord's judges, one of God's judges, and he lived up until a certain point with communion and fellowship with God. And when he'd lost that connection, he quickly realized, but only after a painful journey, that he needed to get that back to get any strength back. Lots to learn from poor Samson. I think we're giving him quite a hard time today, with giving him a bit of a tough time. But there are lots to learn. There are lots of messages to learn from Samson. Just very briefly, this is probably a brief summary of what we've mentioned throughout the course of the discussion. Things that, it's quite clear in the message, it's quite clear in the story. We just need to be careful, There are lots of warning signs on the way. We know ourselves better than anybody else know us. God knows us best. And he will help us get to know ourselves by putting warning signs and things like obstacles in the way when we are moving towards temptation. So we, when you're tempted, you kind of know you're being tempted. You kind of know that there's something wrong here. And it's only up to us to proceed in that, knowing full well we're doing something wrong, or to pick up on the warning signs and actually say, no, let's not proceed any further. Because there's no knowing what will happen. Probably something like this. Probably lots of people will die, will become blind, will become enslaved, will become lost. Let's not allow things to progress to such a stage before we realise that something is wrong. And we return back to God with repentance. We return back, turn away from temptation and resist temptation before we fall into temptation, and it becomes a spiral, a never-ending spiral. We don't want to be enslaved by the devil. So a fitting time to have this talk, because it's the first week of Lent, so it's a good time to revise ourselves and our weaknesses and see what areas of our lives we need to work on, if there are things that we know we are weak in, let us work out what we need to do to strengthen ourselves and protect ourselves to be able to catch ourselves before we get to this stage where Samson found himself in a downward spiral. Any questions at all? Go on, Michael. You always have questions.
Yeah, I don't have I was just going to say that it's
Go on, a comment. Yeah.
it's quite makes me angry, this story sometimes. Like it's full of
Why?
like
What
mistakes
about it? Yeah.
and consequences that and plucking out his eyes and then he dying at the end. It's not like it's not a triumphant ending.
No.
So but in the midst of all his mistakes is quite refreshing to see that God still tries to make something good out of the bad.
Absolutely.
Even though he chose the wrong woman, God uses that somehow to deliver Israel from the Philistines, which is different from the story like David's. David's sins led to a lot of consequences and his children turning on each other. And
Absolutely.
things like that. So
Yeah. Now we thank God that he doesn't pick those who are sinless. That was, I think, my first point in the summary. Or those who are perfect, because none of us are perfect. We are all sinners. We all fall into temptation. We're all weak. None of us can claim to. We're quite judgmental today and very, very critical of Samson. But none of us can say that faced in the same whatever weaknesses we have when faced with that temptation, we wouldn't fall head first into that temptation. Just like for Samson, it was the women, it was the wine, it was the haircut, it was whatever, the bodies. He fell head first into those temptations. We can't claim that we wouldn't do the same, and we have done the same in the past. Thank God, as Michael said, that even when we find ourselves in dire situations, God brings good out of any situation, and can bring good out of any situation, and he does. Let's give God an opportunity to bring good out of our good situations as well, and to avoid those bad situations as much as we can. Thank you. Any other comments or questions at all? We'll call it a day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.